The knock came at 2:47 a.m. Not loud, not aggressive, just 3 measured taps that said, "We don't need to break down your door. You're going to open it." Nia Johnson stood frozen in the hallway of her cramped Oakland apartment, her phone clutched so tight her knuckles had gone pale. Behind her, 6-year-old Amara slept, curled around her stuffed rabbit, yellow ribbons still tied in her braids from yesterday. Nia's eyes flicked to her daughter's face, peaceful in sleep. Those eyes, even closed, she could see them, amber, glowing, unmistakable. The same rare color that marked one of Seoul's most dangerous bloodlines, the color that announced exactly whose daughter Amara was. "Ms. Johnson." The voice outside was calm, professional, male. "We're not here to hurt anyone. We just need to talk about your daughter." Her breath stopped. 6 years. 6 years of running. New cities, new names, new jobs. 6 years of no social media, no paper trail, no mistakes. She'd been invisible. Until now. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. "We know about the girl with the marked eyes. You have one choice left." Below it, a single contact name. Mark Han. The man she'd fled from. The man she'd never told about his daughter. The man whose world devoured everything it touched. The door frame groaned as someone tested the lock. Nia's finger hovered over his name. She pressed the call. Across the Pacific, in a glass-walled penthouse overlooking Seoul's glittering skyline, a phone began to ring in the darkness. Mark Han stood at the window, sleepless as always, watching his empire breathe below him. At 38, he controlled shipping routes, information networks, and enough power to make politicians nervous. He controlled everything, except the one thing that had mattered. His private line, the number only 5 people in the world possessed, lit up with an unfamiliar area code. Oakland, California. His chest tightened. He answered. "Yes." "Mark." Her voice was raw, terrified, older, but unmistakable. "I know I have no right. I know what I did. But they found us. They found her." Background noise, splintering wood, a child's frightened cry. "She has your eyes, Mark. She's 6 years old, and she has your eyes, and they're going to kill us both." The line went dead. Mark stood frozen, the phone still pressed to his ear. "She has your eyes. 6 years old. A daughter. His daughter. The child Nia had hidden from him. The child someone had now found. His hands moved before his mind caught up. "Jahoon." "I need an extraction team in Oakland, California. Full tactical. Targets are a woman named Nia Johnson and a 6-year-old child. They are to be recovered alive and airborne to Seoul within 3 hours." "Sir, that timeline." "I don't care what it costs." His voice was ice over rage. "Those 2 are now our highest priority. Move." He hung up and stared at his reflection in the glass, a man who'd built an empire on control, now unraveling at the edges. 6 years ago, he'd let her walk away. That had been his first mistake. "Hello, family. Where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments so I can send special appreciation your way. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button. This story is about to get deep. Now let's dive in. Mark Han didn't attend meetings. He orchestrated them. The conference room on the 42nd floor was all glass and steel, designed to make visitors feel exposed. 8 men in expensive suits sat around the table, representatives from companies that moved everything from electronics to textiles through Korea's ports. They thought they were negotiating shipping contracts. Mark knew they were asking permission. "The rate increase is unreasonable," one of them said, trying to sound firm. Mark didn't look up from his tablet. "Then use another port." Silence. There was no other port, not in Seoul, not if you wanted your shipments to clear customs without delays, inspections, or unfortunate losses. Mr. Han, another man ventured carefully. Perhaps we could discuss. We just did. Mark set down the tablet and stood. The meeting was over. They filed out like scolded children. This was how Mark Han operated. No raised voices, no threats. Just the quiet certainty that the world bent around him because it had no other choice. At 32, he'd built an empire that existed in the spaces between legal and illegal, visible and invisible. Politicians took his calls. Prosecutors looked the other way. Rivals disappeared not violently, but completely, as if they'd never existed at all. He'd learned early that emotion was a weapon people used against you. Love makes you predictable. Fear makes you reckless. Anger made you stupid. So Mark Han felt nothing until the auditor arrived. Nia Johnson walked into his office 3 days later, wearing a charcoal suit and carrying a leather briefcase that had seen better days. Mr. Han? She extended her hand. I'm here to review your logistics operations for the quarterly audit. Her grip was firm. Her smile was professional. Her eyes were searching. Mark recognized danger when he saw it. Ms. Johnson, please sit. She was American, sent by the parent company to verify that Han Import and Export Solutions was operating within international compliance standards. What she didn't know, what she wasn't supposed to know, was that Mark's legitimate company was a shell, a clean facade wrapped around something far more profitable. I'll need access to your shipping manifests, Nia said, opening her laptop, particularly the ones flagged for irregular routing. Of course. My assistant will provide everything. Including the ones not filed with customs? Mark's expression didn't change. We file everything with customs, Ms. Johnson. I'm sure you do. She smiled. I'm just very thorough. That should have been the end of it. A careful dance, a sanitized audit, a clean report. But Nia Johnson didn't dance carefully. They met 17 times over the next 3 months. Conference rooms became cafes. Formal reviews became working dinners overlooking the Han River. Nia asked questions that came too close to the truth, and Mark gave answers that revealed nothing while sounding like everything. You're very controlled, she said one evening, swirling wine in her glass. It's efficient. It's exhausting. She looked at him directly. Don't you ever just let go? No? Why not? Because letting go meant losing control. And losing control meant losing everything. But he didn't say that. Instead, he found himself asking, why did you become an auditor? Because numbers don't lie. She leaned back. People do, systems do. But if you know how to read a ledger, you can see the truth underneath. Mark almost laughed. She had no idea how right she was, and how dangerous that made her. He should have ended it there, sent her back to America with a perfect report and no reason to look deeper. But he didn't, because for the first time in years, someone looked at him like he was more than a ghost story. More than power and silence. She saw him as human. That was the most dangerous thing of all. Nia stayed late at the office, cross-referencing manifests against customs records. Mark had provided everything she'd asked for. Clean, consistent, perfect. Too perfect. She noticed it in the patterns. Container shipments that arrived on schedule, but showed no corresponding warehouse intake. Routes that made no logistical sense unless you were avoiding something. And then she saw it. Container number 4782K. Scheduled arrival, March 14th. Logged departure, March 12th. No customs record, no manifest, no trail. It didn't exist on paper, but according to the port's internal tracking system, a system she shouldn't have had access to it was being unloaded that night. Nia grabbed her coat. She should have walked away, should have filed her report, taken the next flight home, forgotten Mark Hahn's rare smiles and the way he almost seemed lonely beneath all that control. Instead, she followed the address to a warehouse south of the river and saw the armed guards, the unmarked trucks. The crates are unloaded in silence, and somewhere inside, faint but unmistakable, a child's cry. Nia's blood went cold. She ran. By morning, her apartment was empty. Her phone was disconnected. Her flight records showed a ticket to Oakland purchased at 4:47 a.m. Mark Hahn stood in her abandoned office, staring at the open laptop she'd left behind. On the screen, container number 4782-K. She knew. He could have found her, could have silenced her, could have erased her the way he erased everyone who became a problem. Instead, he let her go. Because some part of him, the part she'd almost reached, understood that she'd seen the truth. And the truth was that Mark Hahn was exactly the monster she feared. He closed the laptop. He didn't know she was pregnant. He didn't know that 6 years later, his daughter's amber eyes would destroy the careful distance he'd built around his heart. All he knew was that losing Nia Johnson felt like the first real thing he'd felt in years, and he would spend the next 6 years trying to forget it. The warehouse was supposed to be empty. That's what the manifest said. That's what the schedule showed. Container number 4782-K didn't exist in any official record, which meant whatever was inside it wasn't supposed to exist either. Nia crouched behind a stack of pallets, her phone recording everything. The warehouse sat in the industrial district south of the Han River, surrounded by buildings that had been abandoned so long, the rust looked structural. No security cameras, no streetlights, just darkness and the smell of salt water and diesel. 3 black vans idled near the loading dock, exhaust rising into the cold March air. Armed men, 6 of them, stood in a loose perimeter. Not police, not military, private security, the kind that didn't ask questions and didn't leave witnesses. The container doors opened with a metallic groan. Nia's breath caught. The crates inside weren't marked with company logos or shipping codes. They were plain, wooden, secured with padlocks instead of custom seals. One of the men barked an order in Korean. 2 others moved forward with crowbars. The first crate opened. Inside, blankets, water bottles, and something that made Nia's stomach turn. Children's clothing, small sizes, worn and dirty. Then she heard it. Faint, terrified, unmistakable. A child crying, not from the crate, from deeper inside the container, past the false wall of cargo. Nia's hand flew to her mouth, stifling the sound that tried to escape. This wasn't smuggling contraband. This wasn't moving illegal goods across borders. This was trafficking human beings, children. The men moved with practiced efficiency, unloading crates, checking manifests on tablets, coordinating in clipped voices. This wasn't their first shipment. It wouldn't be their last. Nia's phone trembled in her hand. She had to go. Had to get this evidence to someone, the embassy, the police, anyone who could stop this. She started to back away and stepped on broken glass. The sound cut through the warehouse like a gunshot. Every head turned. "Bagay nuga iseo!" Someone shouted. Nia ran. Behind her, footsteps, shouts, the mechanical sound of weapons being readied. She burst through a side door into an alley, her lungs burning, her mind screaming one thought over and over. Mark knew. He had to know. She made it 3 blocks before a black sedan cut her off. The door opened. Mark Hahn stepped out. He didn't look angry. That was somehow worse. Mark stood in the middle of the street, hands in his pockets, expression calm. Behind him, the warehouse district glowed faintly in the distance. Nia. She couldn't breathe, couldn't move. He'd known she was there. Of course he'd known. Men like Mark Han didn't leave anything to chance. Get in the car. No. His jaw tightened. It's not safe here. Not safe? Her voice cracked. There were children in that container, Mark. Children. Silence. The sound of the city-distant traffic, wind through empty buildings, felt impossibly loud. I know, he said quietly. 2 words that destroyed everything. He knew. He'd always known. The man who'd bought her coffee and asked about her family, and almost smiled when she challenged him, that man had known that children were being moved through his ports like cargo. How long? Her voice was barely a whisper. Mark didn't answer. How long, Mark? Get in the car, he repeated. I'll take you to the airport. You'll be on the next flight to America. You'll forget what you saw tonight. Forget? She laughed, a broken sound. You think I can just... Yes. His voice was steel. Because the alternative is that you become a problem I can't afford to have. There it was, the truth beneath the careful masks. She wasn't a person to him. She was a liability. Nia looked at him, really looked at him, and saw a stranger. Maybe he'd always been a stranger. Maybe she'd just been desperate to see something human in the spaces between his control. I was falling in love with you, she said softly. Something flickered in his eyes. Pain, maybe, or regret. But he didn't deny what he was. The flight leaves in 3 hours, Mark said. Be on it. He got back in the car and drove away. Nia's apartment was a blur of motion clothes thrown into a suitcase, laptop wiped, phone SIM card snapped in half. Her flight was at 5:30 a.m. Korean Air to San Francisco, connecting to Oakland. She bought the ticket with cash. She didn't pack anything Mark had given her. Didn't take the scarf he'd bought when she'd mentioned being cold. Didn't keep the book he'd left on her desk with a passage underlined. She took nothing that would remind her of the man she'd almost loved. At 4:47 a.m., she boarded the plane. At 6:15 a.m., she was over the Pacific. And somewhere in Seoul, Mark Han stood in his office, staring at the city that bent to his will. His men had asked if they should follow her. He'd said no. They'd asked if she was a threat. He'd said it was handled. But the truth he wouldn't admit even to himself was that he'd let her go because some part of him understood that she'd seen what he really was. And she'd looked at him with horror instead of fear. That was worse than any threat she could pose. He told himself letting her go was mercy. But 6 years later, when he learned about the daughter she'd hidden, when he saw amber eyes staring back at him from across an ocean, he would understand that mercy had cost him everything. The clinic bathroom was white and sterile and too bright. Nia sat on the closed toilet lid, staring at the plastic test in her hand. 2 pink lines. Clear, unmistakable. Pregnant. 4 months since Seoul. 4 months since she'd run from armed men and shipping containers, and the man whose world had turned out to be built on horrors she couldn't unsee. 4 months, and she thought she was safe. Her hands shook. She wasn't crying because she was afraid, though she was. She wasn't crying because she was alone, though she was that too. She was crying because the moment she saw those 2 lines, she knew with absolute certainty what she had to do. Mark Han could never know about this child. 3 weeks later, Nia sat in a library in Oakland, searching for something she hoped wouldn't exist. She'd heard Mark mention it once, casually, during one of their dinners overlooking the Han River. A family legend. A genetic quirk that ran through his bloodline going back generations. Amber eyes. Not hazel, not light brown. True amber, the color of honey held up to sunlight, warm and glowing and impossibly rare. She'd thought it was beautiful when she'd looked into Mark's eyes. Now she typed the words into a search engine and found something else entirely. Forum posts in Korean, translated haltingly by her browser. The Han family, Mark, you see those eyes? You know who they belong to. Old families in Seoul, the ones who run things in the shadows, they all know the amber mark. My uncle said the Han bloodline could be traced by the eyes alone. A curse and a claim. A curse and a claim. Nia's hand moved to her stomach, still flat, still hiding the truth growing inside. If this child had those eyes, if they inherited Mark's rare, unmistakable amber, they wouldn't just be his daughter. They would be marked, claimed, hunted or used or turned into leverage against a man who controlled empires. Nia closed the laptop. She would make sure no one ever connected this child to Mark Han. No father's name on the birth certificate. No social media presence. No photographs sent to anyone. No trail. Amara came into the world on a rainy October morning, screaming her lungs out with the kind of fury that made the nurses laugh. Nia held her daughter and looked into her eyes. Amber. Perfect, glowing, damning amber. She's beautiful, the nurse said, smiling. Yes, Nia whispered. She is. Beautiful and marked and in danger from the moment she drew breath. The years that followed were a careful dance of invisibility. Nia worked remotely accounting, freelance auditing, anything that didn't require her to be visible. They moved twice in the first 3 years. Oakland to Portland, Portland to Sacramento, then back to Oakland when Nia convinced herself maybe enough time had passed. She homeschooled Amara until kindergarten, then enrolled her under Johnson, no middle name, no additional identifiers. No father listed, not even unknown, just blank. Amara grew up curious and kind, with a gap-toothed smile and an endless stream of questions. Why don't I have a daddy? Where do we come from? Why can't I put my picture on the internet like other kids? Nia answered each question carefully, truthfully, without revealing the truth. Your father lives far away. We come from lots of places. Some families are just more private, baby. At night, after Amara fell asleep clutching her stuffed rabbit, Nia would stand in the doorway watching her daughter breathe and wonder if she'd made the right choice. Mark had a right to know, but knowing would destroy them both. So she stayed silent, stayed hidden, stayed vigilant, until the day she wasn't careful enough. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon in the produce section. Amara was 6, reaching for apples, chattering about a book she'd read about a girl who could talk to animals. Nia was checking her phone, distracted for just a moment. Excuse me. The voice made her look up. A man, 50s, expensive suit beneath a casual jacket, Korean. His eyes moved from Nia to Amara and stopped. His expression changed. Nia saw it happen. Recognition, shock, calculation. He was staring at Amara's eyes. Beautiful daughter, he said carefully, accent thick. Very, distinctive eyes. Nia's blood went cold. Thank you. She grabbed Amara's hand. Mommy, I didn't get we're leaving, now. She pulled Amara toward the exit, abandoning the half-full cart, her heartbeat a drum in her ears. Behind her, she heard the man making a phone call in rapid Korean. She caught only 2 words. Han Si, Mr. Han, and Seoul. Nia ran. She had 3 days, maybe 4, before they traced her address. 3 days before Mark's world came crashing down on the life she'd built. 3 days before, she'd have to make a choice she'd sworn she'd never make. call the man she'd run from, or watch her daughter disappear into the same darkness she'd seen in that shipping container 6 years ago. The knock would come at 2:47 a.m., and Nia would be out of choices. The amber eyes that had once made her fall in love had just become her daughter's death sentence. The extraction team arrived first. 4 men in tactical gear, moving through Nia's apartment with silent efficiency. They swept rooms, checked windows, and placed sensors on the door. One of them, the leader, judging by the way the others deferred, approached Nia with something almost like respect. "Ma'am, Mr. Han will arrive in approximately 7 minutes. You and the child are secure." Amara sat on the couch, still clutching her rabbit, yellow ribbons askew in her braids. She'd stopped asking questions an hour ago when the men with guns had escorted them from the safe house Nia had run to after the grocery store. Now she just watched everything with those wide amber eyes. Nia pulled her daughter closer. "It's going to be okay, baby." She wasn't sure who she was trying to convince. The door opened. Mark Han walked in like he owned the building, calm, composed, wearing a black suit that probably cost more than Nia's monthly rent. His hair was slightly disheveled from the flight. That was the only indication he'd just crossed an ocean in 3 hours. His eyes swept the room with professional assessment, then landed on Amara, and the careful control shattered. Mark had prepared for this. On the flight from Seoul, he'd run through scenarios, what to say, how to handle Nia's anger, how to extract them both and manage the threat. He had not prepared for what happened when his daughter looked at him. Amara stared up at him with open curiosity. No fear, no recognition, just assessment, the way children study something new and potentially interesting. Her eyes met his. Amber to amber, the exact same shade, the exact same depth. The room tilted. Mark had built an empire on certainty. He controlled information, predicted outcomes, eliminated variables. He'd stared down armed men and crooked politicians and rival bosses without his pulse rising. None of it mattered now. This 6-year-old child with yellow ribbons in her braids had just destroyed every certainty he'd ever held. "That's her," he said hoarsely, the words barely above a whisper. "That's my daughter." Nia was on her feet instantly, stepping between them. "You don't get to say that." Her voice was raw fury wrapped in steel. "You don't get to walk in here after 6 years and claim her like she's cargo you're recovering." Mark didn't argue. He'd earned every ounce of her rage. "Nia, do you have any idea what I've sacrificed to keep her safe from you?" Her hands were shaking. "From your world? From men who would use a child as leverage?" "I know." "You know?" She laughed, broken. "You don't know anything. You don't know what it's like to raise a daughter alone. To answer when she asks why she doesn't have a daddy. To see her face every day and see yours staring back at me." Mark absorbed each word like a physical blow. Because she was right. He'd lost 6 years. First steps, first words, first everything. And it was his own fault. The world he'd built, the empire he'd been so proud of, had made him into someone Nia had to run from. Someone who couldn't be trusted with something as precious as a child. Amara tugged on Nia's sleeve. "Mommy, why are you yelling?" Nia's expression crumbled. She knelt, pulling Amara into a fierce hug. "I'm sorry, baby. I'm just scared." "Of him?" Amara looked at Mark with renewed interest. "He doesn't look scary." Mark felt something crack in his chest. Slowly, deliberately, he lowered himself to his knees. The men securing the perimeter stiffened. Their boss didn't kneel. Not for politicians, not for rivals, not for anyone. But Mark Han knelt on the worn carpet of Nia's Oakland apartment, until he was eye level with the daughter who didn't know him. "Hello?" he said softly. His voice was gentler than Nia had ever heard it. "My name is Mark." Amara tilted her head, studying him with that unnerving perception children sometimes have. "You have eyes like me?" she observed. "Yes, I do." "Mommy says my eyes are special." "They are." Mark's throat tightened. "Very special." Amara was quiet for a moment, still looking at him with that steady gaze. Then, "You look sad." The words hit deeper than any accusation. Mark had spent 15 years building walls around anything that could hurt him. Emotion was weakness. Attachment was liability. He'd trained himself to feel nothing. But this child, this beautiful, perceptive child, who carried his bloodline in her eyes, had seen straight through to the truth. He was sad. He'd been sad since the morning he'd found Nia's empty apartment. Since he'd chosen his empire over the only person who'd made him feel human. "I am sad," he admitted quietly. "Why?" "Because I lost 6 years with you. Because your mother was right to run. Because I don't deserve to be here. Because I made mistakes," he said instead. "And I can't fix them." Amara considered this. Then, and with the brutal honesty of children, "Mommy says everybody makes mistakes." Mark looked up at Nia. She was crying silently, arms wrapped around herself. He turned back to Amara. "Your mother is very wise. Are you going to stay?" The question hung in the air. Mark didn't have an answer. Not yet, because staying meant confronting everything he'd spent 6 years avoiding. It meant admitting that power couldn't protect the things that actually mattered. It meant choosing differently than he had before. "I don't know," he said honestly. Amara nodded, seemingly satisfied with this. Mark stood slowly, his knees protesting. He was 38 years old, controlled billions in assets, commanded loyalty through fear and respect. None of it prepared him for the weight of his daughter's amber eyes. He looked at Nia. "We need to talk. About who found you. About what they want." "I know what they want." Her voice was flat. "They want her. Because of those eyes. Because of you." "Yes." "Then fix it." Her gaze was steel. "You built this world. You make sure it doesn't touch her." Mark understood then. This wasn't about rescue. This wasn't about reunion. This was about a choice he should have made 6 years ago. Protect the child, or protect the empire. He couldn't have both. Outside, Seoul was waking up to news that Mark Han's private jet had disappeared from tracking. His lieutenants were calling. His rivals were circling. His empire was already beginning to fracture. Mark looked at his daughter, at Amara, with her yellow ribbons and stuffed rabbit and eyes that marked her as his, and felt the last wall crumble. "She's mine," he whispered. Not a claim, a confession. And with those 2 words, everything he'd built began to burn. Amara fell asleep an hour later, curled on the couch with her rabbit, exhausted from fear and confusion and too many strangers in her home. Mark stood at the window, watching the street below. His security team had established a perimeter 3 cars, rotating surveillance, enough firepower to hold off a small army. It wouldn't be enough. "Tell me," Nia said quietly from behind him. "Tell me who found us, and why." Mark didn't turn around. "His name is Kim Jae-sung, 34, brilliant, ruthless. He's been managing the Eastern operations for the past 3 years. One of your men. My successor." The word tasted like ash. "I've been grooming him to take over when I stepped back." "Stepped back?" Nia's voice hardened. "Men like you don't step back." "No." Mark's reflection in the glass looked older than it had 3 hours ago. They die, or they're betrayed by the people they trust. He finally turned to face her. 2 weeks ago, someone accessed my private files, medical records, travel history, communications I thought were buried. They were looking for weaknesses. They were looking for leverage. Mark's jaw tightened. Jae-sung found an old surveillance report one of my men had tracked you 6 years ago, just after you left Seoul. I'd ordered them to verify you'd made it safely to the States and then destroy the file. But they didn't destroy it. No. And when Jae-sung found it, he did what any ambitious lieutenant would do. He kept digging. Found medical records showing you'd visited a clinic in Oakland. Or found school enrollment for a child the right age. Nia's hands clenched. He put it together. He put it together. Mark's voice was hollow. A child with my bloodline. A secret kept for 6 years. The perfect leverage against me. Or the perfect target if you wouldn't cooperate. Mark met her eyes. Yes. The word hung between them like a blade. Nia crossed to where Amara slept, checking her daughter's breathing with the obsessive care of a mother who'd spent 6 years looking over her shoulder. So what now? She didn't look at Mark. You hide us somewhere? Different names, different countries? How long before someone else finds the file? I've already scrubbed it. How long before someone else gets curious about where you disappeared to? Nia's voice cracked. How long before another ambitious lieutenant decides a 6-year-old is acceptable collateral? Mark didn't have an answer, because she was right. His world didn't forget, didn't forgive, didn't stop circling until it found blood. Mark's phone buzzed. Encrypted message from Ji-hoon, his head of security. Jae-sung just mobilized his personal team. 12 men, armed. They're claiming you gave the order. Mark's blood went cold. What is it? Nia asked, reading his expression. Jae-sung, he's moving. Moving where? Here. Mark was already signaling his men, 3 sharp gestures that sent them into combat positions. He knows I'd come for you. He's betting I'll be too distracted to see him coming. Nia grabbed Amara, pulling her daughter close. The little girl stirred, confused, still half asleep. Mommy? It's okay, baby. Just hold on to me. Mark's phone buzzed again. This time, a video call. He answered. Kim Jae-sung's face filled the screen's sharp features, cold eyes, the expression of a man who'd already made his choice. Hyung-nim. The honorific was mocking. I hear congratulations are in order. A daughter. How unexpected. Stand down, Jae-sung. Stand down? Jae-sung smiled. You disappear for 3 hours, abandon our operations, expose your position to recover a woman and a child, and you want me to stand down? This isn't about the organization. Everything is about the organization. Jae-sung's composure cracked. You built this empire on sacrifice, on doing what was necessary, and now you're going to throw it away for a child you didn't even know existed? Mark's voice dropped to ice. She's my daughter. She's leveraged. Jae-sung leaned closer to the camera. Do you know how many people would pay to control Mark Han's heir? How many rivals would kill for the chance to erase your bloodline? You're talking about murdering a 6-year-old. I'm talking about protecting what we built. Jae-sung's eyes were fervent, almost desperate. Legacy matters more than innocence, Hyung-nim. You taught me that. The line went dead. Mark stared at the blank screen. You taught me that. He had. Every lesson, every decision, every cold calculation, he'd shaped Jae-sung into exactly this. A man who believed power mattered more than people. A man who'd looked at a child and seen only an equation. Mark had created this monster. And now that monster was coming for his daughter? How many men does he have? Nia's voice was steady, but Mark could see the fear underneath. 12 here, maybe 30 more in the area if he mobilizes the full team. And you? 4 here, another 8 I can call in from San Francisco. The math was brutal. Nia looked at her daughter, then at Mark. You can't win this. I know. He'll keep coming. Even if you stop him tonight, someone else will rise up. Someone else will look at Amara and see leverage. I know, Mark said again, softer this time. Then you only have one choice. Nia's eyes blazed with the same fierce certainty that had made him fall in love with her 6 years ago. Burn it! Mark stared at her. What? Your empire, your organization, every connection, every operation, every person who knows your name. Her voice was steel. Burn it all to the ground. You're asking me to destroy everything I've built. I'm asking you to choose. She held Amara tighter. The empire or your daughter. You can't have both. You've never been able to have both. Silence. Outside, Mark could hear the soft chatter of his security team. Inside, Amara's breathing was the only sound. Everything he'd built. 15 years of careful work, power, control. The kind of influence that made politicians nervous and rivals careful. All of it, for a 6-year-old child he'd known for 3 hours. It wasn't even a choice. Mark pulled out his phone and made a call. Jihoon, I need you to... His phone died mid-sentence. The lights went out, and in the darkness, Mark heard the unmistakable sound of tactical teams moving into position. Jae-sung hadn't waited. He was already here. The first gunshot shattered the front window. Mark moved on instinct, throwing himself over Amara as glass rained down. Nia screamed, pulling her daughter beneath her body, creating a human shield. Tunnel! Mark shouted to his men. Get them to the tunnel now! The apartment erupted in chaos. His security team returned fire, muzzle flashes lighting the darkness like lightning. The tactical formation dissolved into close-quarters combat as Jae-sung's men breached from 3 directions. Mark hauled Nia and Amara toward the bedroom. There's an exit through the closet. Leads to the basement, then the parking garage. Cars waiting bulletproof, full tank, GPS scrambled. What about you? Nia's eyes were wild. I'm ending this. Mark, go! He pushed them toward the closet, where one of his men was already tearing away the false wall. Jihoon will get you to the airport. Private charter to Vancouver. Documents are in the glove box. Amara was crying now, clutching her rabbit, her amber eyes huge with terror. Mark knelt one last time, meeting his daughter's gaze. Be brave, like your mother. Don't go, Amara whispered. Something broke in Mark's chest. I have to, but I'll find you again, I promise. He didn't know if it was a promise he could keep. Another explosion grenade or flashbang, somewhere in the living room. Smoke poured through the apartment. Now! Mark roared. Jihoon grabbed Nia's arm, pulling her and Amara into the darkness of the tunnel. The last thing Mark saw was his daughter looking back at him, tears streaming down her face. Then the wall sealed shut, and Mark Han turned to face the men who'd come to destroy everything he'd just chosen to save. The gunfire stopped. Mark's remaining men lay dead or dying. The apartment was a ruin, bullet holes in the walls, furniture overturned, the acrid smell of gunpowder thick in the air. Jae-sung walked through the destruction like he was surveying a business acquisition. 6 men flanked him, weapons trained on Mark. Young Neem? Jae-sung's smile was cold. Where is she? Mark stood in the center of the wreckage, hands empty, suit torn and blood-stained. Gone. Gone? Jae-sung's expression darkened. You think I won't find her? I found her once. I'll find her again. Not if you're dead, Jae-sung laughed. You're outnumbered and unarmed. What exactly do you think happens now? Now? Mark's voice was ice and rage. Now I show you what happens when you threaten my daughter. He moved. 15 years in Seoul's underworld had taught Mark Han that power wasn't about having the most men or the biggest guns. It was about being willing to do what others wouldn't. He crossed the distance to Jae-sung's closest guard in 3 steps, disarming him with brutal efficiency. The gun fired twice, both shots finding targets before the other men could react. Mark used the falling body as cover, rolling behind the overturned couch as gunfire tore through the apartment again. 4 men left. He came up firing. 3. A bullet grazed his shoulder. He didn't feel it. 2. The last guard hesitated, fatal mistake. 1. Jae-sung stood alone now, his own weapon raised but shaking slightly. Mark walked toward him, bleeding, exhausted, beyond caring. You taught me, Jae-sung said desperately. That sentiment was weakness. That family made you vulnerable. That power was the only thing that mattered. I was wrong. Mark's voice stopped him cold. I built an empire on the idea that emotion was liability, that people were resources, that legacy mattered more than life. Mark raised his weapon. I created you. I shaped you into this, and that's my greatest failure. So what? Jae-sung's voice cracked. You're just going to throw it all away? Everything we built? Not we. Mark's finger tightened on the trigger. Me. I built this, and I'm the one who's going to tear it down. For a child you didn't even know existed? For the child I should have protected from the moment she was born. Mark's eyes were cold. For the woman I should have chosen 6 years ago. For every person who suffered because I convinced myself power was worth more than humanity. You're insane. No. Mark pulled the trigger. I'm finally seeing clearly. The shot echoed once. Jae-sung fell, and the empire Mark Han had built on silence and shadows began to crumble. Mark staggered to the window, pulling out his phone with bloodied hands. It took him 3 tries to access the encrypted files. He'd prepared for this for the day when the empire became more dangerous than the enemies outside it. Hidden servers, backdoor access, digital insurance policies, everything. With trembling fingers, Mark initiated the protocol he'd hoped never to use. Account numbers flowing to international authorities. Shipping routes exposed to customs agencies. Names, dates. Transactions. 15 years of carefully hidden corruption uploaded to servers in 6 different countries. The FBI, Interpol. The Korean National Police. Every agency that had been hunting him for years was about to get Christmas morning delivered in a single data dump. His phone buzzed with incoming calls. Lieutenants, associates, politicians whose careers depended on his silence. He ignored them all. The final file was the hardest. His own confession. Video recorded 3 years ago in a moment of paranoia, insurance against betrayal. Mark stared at his past self on the screen, listing crimes in a calm, measured voice. He pressed upload. The screen flashed. Transmission complete. Mark dropped the phone. Outside, sirens wailed. Police, fire, federal agents responding to the anonymous tips that were already flooding their systems. The empire was burning, and Mark Han, who'd once controlled Seoul's underworld without raising his voice, stood in the ruins of his safe house and felt something he hadn't felt in 15 years. Relief. His phone buzzed one last time. Text from Ji-hoon. They're safe. Airborne. Vancouver in 4 hours. Mark closed his eyes. Amara was safe. Nia was safe. And he had just destroyed everything he'd spent his life building to make sure they stayed that way. The door burst open federal agents, weapons drawn, shouting commands. Mark raised his hands. "My name is Mark Han," he said clearly, "and I'm ready to confess to everything." Outside, dawn was breaking over Oakland, and somewhere over the Pacific, a little girl with amber eyes slept peacefully, finally free from the shadow of her father's empire. Because he'd chosen her. And that choice had cost him everything. But for the first time in his life, Mark Han understood what it meant to be free. 48 hours after the upload, the headlines hit every major news outlet within 6 hours. Seoul Kingpin's empire exposed in massive data leak. International trafficking network dismantled. Mark Han surrenders, inside the confession that shocked the underworld. Nia watched the news from a hotel room in Vancouver. Amara asleep beside her, finally exhausted enough to rest. Her phone, a burner Jahoon had given her, showed a cascade of alerts. Arrests in Seoul, Busan, Hong Kong, Los Angeles. Shipping routes seized. Bank accounts frozen across 17 countries. Politicians resigning. CEOs under investigation. Mark hadn't just exposed his own organization. He'd detonated the entire network, or every corrupt official who'd taken his money, every business that had laundered his profits, every person who'd looked the other way while children disappeared into shipping containers. All of it burning. The news showed footage of Mark being led into FBI custody in Oakland. No struggle, no lawyers shouting about rights. Just a man in a blood-stained suit, hands cuffed, walking calmly toward consequences he'd finally stopped running from. The reporter's voice. Surrendered voluntarily, providing what sources describe as the most comprehensive confession in organized crime history. Nia's hands shook. He'd done it. He'd actually done it. Burned his empire to save their daughter. 3 days later, Nia sat across from a federal prosecutor in a nondescript office building. "Ms. Johnson?" The woman, mid-40s, sharp-eyed, exhausted, spread files across the table. "We need to discuss your testimony." "I've already told you everything I know." "About 6 years ago, yes, but you've been in contact with Mark Han recently, the night of the Oakland incident." "He saved our lives." Nia's voice was steel. "Men were coming to kill my daughter. He stopped them. By killing 4 people and triggering a federal investigation that's implicated over 200 individuals." The prosecutor's expression softened slightly. "I'm not saying he's wrong. I'm saying the law doesn't care about his motivations." "What's his sentence?" "If he cooperates fully, 25 years minimum, more likely 40. She paused. "Ms. Johnson, your daughter is 6 years old. By the time Mark Han walks free, if he walks free, she'll be in her 40s. Nia closed her eyes. Amara would grow up without him. Elementary school, middle school, high school, college, maybe marriage, and children of her own, all of it without the father who'd sacrificed everything for her. "He knew," Nia whispered. "When he made that choice, he knew." "Yes." The prosecutor's voice was gentle. "We're offering full witness protection. New identities, relocation assistance. You and Amara can disappear completely. Start over." The old instinct flared, run, hide, protect. But something had changed. "Can I see him?" Nia asked quietly. "Before you transfer him?" The prosecutor hesitated. "That's irregular." "Please?" A long pause. Then, "I'll see what I can do." The visitation room was stark white and fluorescent lit, divided by reinforced glass. Mark sat on the other side, wearing an orange jumpsuit that looked obscene on him, this man who'd worn $1,000 suits and controlled empires. He looked tired. Humans. Nia picked up the phone. He did the same. "Hi," she said, "because what else do you say to the father of your child, who just confessed to 15 years of crimes to save her? Hi. His voice was hoarse. Are you safe? Yes. Jahoon got us out. We're in Vancouver. Good. Relief flickered across his face. Amara? Asking questions I don't know how to answer. Nia's throat tightened. She wants to know if you're coming back. Mark's jaw clenched. What did you tell her? That you had to go away for a while. That you did something very brave, but very complicated. Tears burned Nia's eyes. She asked if you're a hero or a bad guy. What did you say? I said you're her father. And that's more complicated than heroes and villains. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the muffled sounds of the facility beyond the visitation room. I'm not running, Mark said finally. From the charges, from the consequences. For the first time in my life, I'm not running. I know. They're offering 40 years, maybe more. I know that too. Nia pressed her hand against the glass. Mark? Why? You could have hidden us. Could have used your resources to make us invisible. Why destroy everything? Because hiding you meant keeping the empire intact. And as long as it existed, someone would eventually look at Amara and see leverage. His eyes met hers amber, the same shade as their daughter's. The only way to protect her was to burn it all down. Even if it meant losing her? Especially if it meant losing her. His voice broke. Better she grows up without me than grows up hunted because of me. Nia was crying now, silent tears tracking down her face. She has your eyes, she whispered. Every time I look at her, I see you. Tell her. Mark's composure cracked. Tell her I'm sorry I couldn't stay, but tell her she's the reason I finally did something right. She's 6 years old. She won't understand. Then tell her when she's older. Tell her when she asks why her father wasn't there. He pressed his hand against the glass, matching hers. Tell her I chose her over everything, and I'd choose her again. The guard signaled time was up. Nia stood slowly. What happens now? Now I pay for 15 years of mistakes. Mark stood too. And you give Amara the life I could never have given her. Safe, clean, free. Mark! Go, Nia. His smile was sad and genuine. Give our daughter the world. I'll carry the weight of what I was. The line disconnected. Nia watched through the glass as guards led Mark Han away. This man who'd controlled empires and now controlled nothing. He didn't look back. And somehow, that made it harder. That night in the hotel room, Amara woke up crying. Is Daddy gone? She whispered into the darkness. Nia pulled her daughter close, breathing in the scent of her shampoo and the innocence she'd fought so hard to preserve. Yes, baby. He's gone. Forever? Nia thought about 40 years, about a little girl growing up and growing old while her father sat in a cell, paying for the choice that saved her life. For a very long time. Amara was quiet. Then, did he love me? And there, in a Vancouver hotel room, with her daughter's amber eyes looking up at her in the dark, Nia told the truth. More than anything in the world. More than power, more than freedom, more than his own life. She held Amara tighter. He loved you so much, he gave up everything to keep you safe. Even though he just met me? Especially because he just met you. Nia kissed her daughter's forehead. Love doesn't need time, sweetheart. Sometimes it just needs one moment to know what matters. Amara considered this with the gravity of children who understand more than adults give them credit for. I wish I could tell him I love him too. Nia's heart shattered. He knows, baby. He knows. Outside, Vancouver's lights glittered through the window. And somewhere in an Oakland detention facility, Mark Han lay awake, staring at the ceiling, carrying the weight of his choices. He'd lost everything, but his daughter was safe. And for the first time in 15 years of darkness, that was enough. The house was small, not penthouse overlooking Seoul, small. Actually small 3 bedrooms, a postage stamp yard, paint peeling slightly on the shutters. The kind of house that disappeared into suburban normalcy. Nia loved it. She stood at the kitchen window watching Amara chase butterflies across the grass, her daughter's laughter carrying on the spring breeze. Yellow ribbons in her braids, grass stains on her knees, completely unaware that 8 months ago, men with guns had tried to kill her. They'd taken witness protection at first. New names, new city, new identities. Sarah and Emma Martinez, living in Portland, Oregon. But after 3 months of looking over her shoulder and seeing nothing, no black sedans, no men in expensive suits, no amber-eyed strangers, Nia had made a choice. She called the prosecutor. "I want our real names back," she'd said. "I want to stop running. Ms. Johnson, the threat level is gone." Nia's voice was certain. "Mark destroyed the network. The people who would have come for us are either in prison or scattered. We're not hiding anymore." A long pause. Then, "Are you sure?" "Yes." So they became Nia and Amara Johnson again, not running, not hiding, just living. The letter arrived on a Tuesday, forwarded through official channels. Nia recognized the handwriting, immediately precise, controlled, unmistakably Mark's. She waited until Amara was asleep before opening it. Nia, the plea deal was finalized. 28 years, with good behavior, possibly 22. "I know what you're thinking, that it's too long, that Amara will grow up without me, that I'm paying too steep a price. You're wrong. I've spent the last 8 months learning something I should have learned 15 years ago. How to be still. How to exist without controlling everything around me. How to sit with silence and not fill it with strategy. Prison is teaching me what your absence tried to teach me 6 years ago, that power is a cage dressed up as freedom. I've started a program here, teaching inmates basic literacy. Helping men who never finish school learn to read to their children during visits. It's small, meaningless in the scope of what I destroyed. But it's real. For the first time in my life, something I'm doing is just good. Not strategic, not profitable, just human. Jahoon tells me Amara is thriving, that she's in a real school now, that she has friends. Tell her I'm proud of her. Tell her I think about her every single day. Tell her the world is safer because she exists in it. Mark P.S. They let me have a photo now. If you're willing, I'd like one of her. Just one, so I can remember why any of this mattered. Nia pressed the letter to her chest and cried. Not from grief. From something closer to hope. "Mommy, can I ask about Daddy?" Nia looked up from chopping vegetables. Amara sat at the kitchen table, homework spread in front of her, amber eyes serious. 7 years old now? Growing up so fast. "Of course, baby." Why did he have to go away? They'd had versions of this conversation before, but Amara kept circling back, trying to understand something too big for a child's comprehension. "He made mistakes," Nia said carefully, sitting beside her daughter. "Big ones. And when you make big mistakes, sometimes you have to make big sacrifices to fix them." "But he saved us?" "Yes. So he's a hero." "He's complicated," Nia corrected gently. "He did bad things for a long time, hurt people, built an empire on other people's pain. But when it mattered most, when he had to choose between his power and you, he chose you." Amara processed this, the way children do, sorting the world into categories that made sense. "I want to write him a letter," she said finally. "To say thank you." Nia's throat tightened. "I think he'd like that." That night, Amara carefully printed her message in crayon. "Dear Daddy, my name is Amara. I'm in 2nd grade. My favorite color is yellow. Mommy says you gave up everything to keep me safe. Thank you. I hope prison isn't too scary. I have your eyes. Mommy says they're special. I love you, even though I don't really remember you. Love, Amara." She drew a picture beneath the words, a stick figure family holding hands. Mommy, Amara, and Daddy, standing separate but connected by a long, long line. Nia mailed it the next morning. 3 weeks later, Mark's response arrived. Just one sentence, written in careful script. "Your eyes aren't special because they're marked. They're special because they're yours." Nia stood on the porch that evening, watching the sun set over the neighborhood. Normal houses, normal families, normal lives. 8 months ago, she'd been hiding in the darkness, a stranger recognizing her daughter's eyes in a grocery store, her world imploding. Now, Amara played soccer on Saturdays, had sleepovers with friends whose parents didn't carry guns, came home talking about math tests and playground drama and all the beautiful, mundane things childhood should be. The amber eyes that had once been a death sentence were just eyes, rare and beautiful and hers, not a mark of power, not a symbol of legacy, not leverage or threat or curse, just a little girl's eyes. Mark had understood that before she did. That's why he'd burned it all down, because as long as the empire existed, Amara would never be just a child. She'd always be an asset, a target, a piece on a board. Power hadn't protected him. It had isolated him, corrupted him, turned him into someone the woman he loved had to run from. But love, messy, sacrificial, world-ending love for a daughter he'd known for 3 hours that had finally set him free. Even from a prison cell, Mark Han was more free than he'd ever been in his penthouse overlooking Seoul. Because he'd chosen differently. Because he'd put humanity before the empire. Because he'd looked at amber eyes and seen not legacy, but innocence worth protecting at any cost. Inside, Amara was drawing again. Another picture for her daddy. This one showed a man behind bars, but he was smiling. And outside the bars, a little girl with amber eyes held up a sun. Nia looked at the drawing and understood something profound. The mark that once summoned violence now marked the end of it. Mark Han had broken the cycle. His daughter would grow up free from the shadows he'd created. Free to be ordinary, free to be herself. And somewhere in a federal prison, a man who'd once controlled empires learned to find peace in teaching someone to read. The curse had ended, not with power, but with a father's choice to love his daughter more than his legacy. Nia hung the drawing on the refrigerator, next to Amara's spelling test and soccer schedule. Normal, beautiful, free. Outside, the sun set gold and amber, and for the first time in 6 years, Nia Johnson felt something she'd almost forgotten existed: hope. Sometimes the most powerful thing a person can do is choose to stop being powerful. Sometimes the bravest thing a father can do is walk away from everything he built so his daughter can walk into a world that won't destroy her. And sometimes, the mark of a bloodline isn't what you inherit, it's what you choose to end. This is the story of a man who controlled empires but couldn't control his heart, and the daughter whose amber eyes reminded him what it meant to be human. Thanks so much, my dear friends, for enjoying this beautiful story till this end. If you've not subscribed kindly, subscribe now to be notified when we drop our next story. Also, like the video and comment where you are watching from and what time it's at your end. Thank you.